Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's topic, which is Government Client Portals and Grants and Contributions. We're presenting today from Eperformance, our training academy. Eperformance specializes in public sector training and solutions for Dynamics CRM in the area of department-wide architectures, CRM government portal solutions, and CRM solutions like grants management, contract management, regulatory, and so forth. So our presenters today, myself, Eric Elaine, I'm a CRM enterprise architect and a specialist in grants and contributions. And joining me is Michael Manishin, one of our CRM business analysts, who will be demonstrating the SMART program solution today, which is a demonstration of a government client portal extending Dynamics CRM for the purposes of managing a grant and contribution program. And on that term, grant and contribution, that we've noticed people have registered from the provinces, and you may not use that term contribution. Everything's a grant, so contribution is more of a federal term, and it sort of refers to maybe perhaps a conditional grant. So we might switch back and forth as we go through the presentation. We may refer to it as G&C, or grants and contributions, or just grants, but we're really talking about the same thing. So, and for our agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about web portals in general, then take a closer look at government client portals, some of the business drivers and technical challenges associated with implementing government client portals, and then we'll get into a case study for the Ontario Smart Green program, which is an Ontario-funded program that's run by the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association to support manufacturers in Ontario, and then we'll summarize. We'll have an opportunity at the end to, if you want to ask any questions through the chat feature, then we'll respond to those questions towards the end of the presentation. So getting into it. Okay, understanding web portals. So according to Wikipedia, a portal is an electronic gateway to a collection of digital files, online services, or an information service of some type. And it's accessible either internally in an organization through the intranet or publicly through the internet using a web browser. And you know, over the last 20 years or so, technology has evolved a lot of different types of portals in different sectors. So you have personal portals like LinkedIn and Facebook. We're all familiar with those. Corporate internet portals like we just talked about for employees and staff. Cultural portals that may have collections and galleries. Portals, which are specialized industry-specific portals, like the real estate industry, for example, for browsing through available real estate properties, or vertical information portals, e-commerce portals. We all use those for online shopping, and client portals are also shopping sites, and finally, government client portals, which are unique, have certain characteristics that are specific to dealing with government agencies, and that, of course, is our focus for today. So government client portals, they must be secure and private. I mean, in Canada, we have the Privacy Act, and so there's a lot of special things that we need to do when we're dealing with citizens' information from a government agency. So that makes government client portals a little bit different. So typically, government client portals are used to provide self-service to citizens to perhaps browse for information, register as a client to an agency for some purposes, request information, access online services, or for the more complex business transactions that might be for grants or loans or various government services that end up in providing funding to the citizen. So these portals have been evolving for over 20 years, and more recently are starting to get fairly sophisticated. So what are the business drivers for government agencies implementing government client portals? There's an increased demand for citizen self-service electronic access. People expect to be able to access government services online now, and when they do, they want to be able to view a profile of their activity with an agency, and if they are engaged in a request or a business transaction of some sort, they like to be able to check on the status of their particular service request. Another area is increased efficiency in the delivery of government services. Governments are always trying to do more with less, and be able to deliver grant programs more efficiently with faster processing times and streamlined administration. And we also see in most agencies they're mandated to provide improved service to citizens, and a good way of doing that is often through online services or electronic service delivery of programs and services. So this is a summary of sort of key business drivers for an agency wanting to set up a government client portal. Now let's look at some of the challenges. Stakeholder management, we'll talk a bit more about this, but when people are coming to a government agency through a portal, they often have different roles. They could be an individual applying for a driver's license, or perhaps could be somebody from an organization applying for a grant who's a signing authority, for example, so has a different role. So in stakeholder management, there's a need to profile clients for the different types of stakeholder roles that they have. At the same time, when you're using portals and you're extending a service out to the public, you also need to be able to maintain a single version of the client's information. Otherwise, it's very confusing for the client. We'll talk more about that. Advanced submission form management for business transactions. So often government departments are, they'll have literally hundreds of different types of application forms or different types of submission forms involved in the service delivery process. And there's a need to be able to handle and manage these with flexible, accessible, bilingual capability, and to be able to provide feedback and status throughout the service process on these submission forms as they go through the process. So a big part of portals that are getting into the advanced business transaction area is submission management, something else we'll talk a bit more about. Customer experience management. So once a government agency decides to make a publicly available portal service, they find out very quickly that the applicants or the citizens will very quickly have an opinion on the type of service that they're providing. So it's important to provide an intuitive, high-quality online service, and it needs to be responsive, but it also needs to integrate with the internal service processes. For example, portals are very good at responding to, say, a request with an immediate email saying, we're working on your request, and here's a file number that you can refer to later. But then internally, that may be days, weeks, or sometimes even months before something happens. So the customer experience becomes very important when in the case of government client portals. And of course, security and privacy. Most government agencies will have a requirement to authenticate through, in the case of the federal GC key or at the provincial level, various types of authentication systems. And of course, the security of data and access to information, the Privacy Act, all make the handling of information in government client portals a little bit special, a little bit different from what you might see on the commercial side. So quite a few challenges here. Let's just drill down on a couple to build a little more context around them. Okay, so what is stakeholder management? We talked about that a slide or two ago. So in this slide, we see on the left individuals or organizations coming to a government agency to perhaps request a service, register a complaint, request funding, or sell a product or service. On the government agency side, we see a number of services and business activity associated with these requests, like customer service, funding, purchasing, complaints, information, and these tend to be delivered by different areas within the government agency. So there could be a customer support area, there could be a complaints area, a group of multiple grants and contribution program areas. There could be, of course, the purchasing area. And in each of these areas, over time, have developed their own database of contact information and profiles and all the different contacts that are coming in for different services. So this isn't such a big problem if people are dealing with individual parts of the organization, but when you're looking at it through a lens of a government client portal, all of a sudden you need to be thinking about having one version of the truth when it comes to identifying a contact. So on this next slide, we see that you could have an individual on the left there. You could have an individual that has multiple roles. So an individual could be, say, a grant recipient. They could be a complainant, complaining about something. you know, to a certain type of program. There could be a vendor selling something to the government. This could all be the same individual. And then on the agency side, their profile information, their contact information is being managed but duplicated across multiple different databases in different areas. So ideally, and not just for the purposes of having a government client portal, but it becomes much more of an issue. You know, when people are coming through a portal, you need to be able to have one consolidated view of all the stakeholder information. So, for example, if somebody comes to the portal, they previously entered their address information and they want to change their address information. You know, they need to be able, that information needs to be in one place rather than somehow trying to change their address in all the different sort of traditional areas that it might have been stored throughout a government agency. So stakeholder management becomes very important with government client portals, the ability to have a single version of the truth for a contact or organization, and to be able to manage multiple profiles depending on what those individuals or organizations are doing with the government agency. So, you know, whether their profile is that of a grant recipient or a complainant or some other community of interest, or, you know, whether they're a vendor or a member of the media or whatever. So that gives you a bit of an overview of what stakeholder management is, and keep that in mind as we go through the demo. You'll see a little bit more about what we're trying to, why we focused in on stakeholder management, why it's important to a government client portal. And why is submission management important? So we talked about the various types of online submission forms required for business transactions. So what we've noticed, and particularly in grants programs, you know, there are often hundreds of application form types throughout an agency that does, you know, has multiple different types of grant programs. And a lot of the data that are being managed in grant programs actually come from these forms, and they're entered by, you know, or submitted, you know, from the applicants to these programs. And yeah, each service requires a series of connected submissions throughout a service lifecycle. So it may start with an application, turn into agreement, and then become a progress report later on in the process. All of these different forms are linked together and provide the complete story of what's going on throughout the end-to-end grant cycle. And each of these submissions are often cycled back and forth. They need to be amended. Information needs to be changed. So the ability to understand this concept of an online submission form and how it can be made efficient and managed, again, is important to government client portals. Heritage Canada, by the way, has recently implemented a government client portal to reduce their grants and contributions processing effort by up to 25%. So you know, if you get this right, if you get the processing of online forms right, you can reduce the amount of effort it takes to process a form by almost 20 times. There's a lot of studies to support this type of you know, efficiency gain. So submission management, very important to government client portals. And client experience management. So we have a slide here that's showing that, on the left is showing CRM, in particular Microsoft Dynamics CRM, which is very popular in federal government and provincial agencies now. And it's becoming kind of the go-to tool for managing grants and contribution programs. And in CRM, it's obviously a very good client relationship management system. It's a great place to keep client data. It's good at client management. It's good at client engagement. It can manage all the activities associated with clients, say, through a grants process, like tracking the emails, tracking the meetings or the calls or whatever's going on with that client. But it is a government-centric view. So when you publish a portal, or when you make that portal available, then you have to start thinking about the client's perspective. So the client experience in accessing your service electronically. So they're now coming in self-service 24/7. They have their own view of what your service is based on what you're providing to them from this client delivery process, this electronic delivery process. And they're looking for, you know, how is this system, how is this service of value to me? So they're having a client-centric view. So adding client portals to an agency's CRM solution certainly empowers clients to access government services electronically and can be very efficient, but it also creates a client expectation for a level of service. We talked about that example where, you know, a government client portal can submit an email saying, you know, thank you for submitting your form. Here's your case file number. We're working on it. but you need to be able to follow up. You need to be able to integrate that external portal service, that external portal activity with your internal processes, so to gain efficiency and to provide a good responsive service to the clients. So this takes us to our case study for today, the Ontario Government SMART program. The SMART program was created to support productivity improvements projects with Ontario manufacturers. So it's a grants and contribution program, and by contribution we mean money is granted, but the money is released to the applicant based on them reaching certain milestones which they have provided as part of their application. So they may receive 20% up front, they may receive 50% at some point of progress within their projects, and then they might receive the rest of the funds at the end of their grant project. So, and the program designed for this project was a typical grant or contribution program. We're starting with a grant application, going into an assessment step where program officers would review and assess the applications and approve them, a grant agreement, and then ultimately progress reporting for the various milestones that they needed to complete before their project was completed. So some of the challenges for the SMART program, they didn't really have a lot of time to get this going. They had about 8 weeks, so they needed a quick ramp up. And they also, once they launched the program and made it public and, you know, the application forms became available online, they had about 45 days from submission to award notification. So very aggressive. And they also had requirements for high levels of accountability, so they needed experts involved in the assessment, and they needed, you know, conflict of interest checks and this types of things. They also had limited budget to pay for admin staff, so they needed to be able to process a high volume of grant projects with a limited number of staff. So what the SMART program ended up doing was they automated the end-to-end grant process. They did it by implementing Microsoft Dynamics CRM with a grant management accelerator for the program officers. They also provided a public-facing service with a CRM Government Client Portal extension to CRM for the applicants to gain access to the program, you know, from the initial application through to the final progress reports. And they also used a cloud service to expedite meeting the program launch date, as we saw was very aggressive. So I'll talk a little bit more about what this system looks like, and then Michael's going to take us through an actual example of it. So we'll divide it into two scenarios. Demo scenario one is the public-facing side of the solution, so the Government Client Portal. So here, the SMART program was providing secure access to all of the applicants of the program. They provided a submission portfolio because many of these applicants, you know, there's often would be coming to the program year after year. So there would need to be a history of the various submissions that the various times that they had submitted to the program, and also there were multiple submissions for each grant project, so they need to be able to sort of manage multiple submissions in a portfolio. It supported the submission lifecycle, so starting with an application, leading into an agreement, and then finally one or many progress reports until the grant project was completed. It has the ability to communicate through requests from the applicants rather, into the program, and of course it has the ability for stakeholder management. So in the case of the SMART program, there were, you know, individuals, organizations, there were often multiple applicants involved in completing an application, so the system needed to be able to manage all of these different stakeholder roles and the profiles and history associated with them. So that gives you an overview of the Government Client Portal that the SMART program implemented, and Mike is now going to take us into a demonstration of that, and then we'll look at the second scenario, which is the program officer side, or the Dynamics CRM-based grant management system. Over to you, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Eric. I'll just pop up everything right now so we can switch into it. So this is the login screen for the government portal that Eric was alluding to. What you're looking at right now is the welcome screen, but I want to mention for the login, it's able to be accessible through GC key or just a standard password login like I just used. So what you're looking at now is the portal, and we'll just quickly go over the left-hand menu options, and then we'll dive into a few of them. Starting off with the client profile, this is where I would be able to manage all the different roles that I have, whether it be for the same company or different ones, applying as an individual to programs if they're available to me, as a member of an organization, and I can also manage the people associated to those profiles if I'm the administrator as well, but we'll dive into that in a few minutes. The My Applications section, which is where I would be able to see all my submissions associated to the various programs that I'm able to submit against. So if there's a number of programs that are available to me, I'll see them all collected in the My Application screen, and I'll also see all the submissions that I have completed in the past or am working on. The service request is how I interact with the back office. So if I realize I made a mistake on one of my submission forms and I want to get ahead of it rather than them in the back office find it first, I can request an amendment through the service request screen, and that just expedites the process. So it speeds things up. You can point attention to the areas where you need that require it. The user preferences is the user's information for the portal. So this would be my contact information, my account in the actual government portal itself. And then, of course, the help. If I'm ever lost, I'm able to click help, and this is a very customizable area. I can reach an FAQ, a document, any sort of way to guide the user through the process of using the portal, and also information about the programs that I'm applying to or reports that I'm filling out. So we'll start by diving into the client profile. And what we're going to see once this loads is all the organizations or individual profiles that I have in the government portal. So right now you're seeing 3 options: Jones Factory Inc., Jones Manufacturing Inc., and Solar Solutions Inc. So in this example, they're all organizations, but if I were to go in as my user named Scott Jones and want to apply as an individual, I would be able to create an individual account or a profile by clicking new client and registering as an individual. In this particular place, all the programs are only for organizations, so we have 3 different organizations that Scott Jones belongs to in one way or the other. So we can see that the client name is clear. The description is organization, and then the status of whether or not my client profile is complete or not. Over in the actions column, we can either edit the existing profiles, or we can click on something called client registration or client user registration. And when I do dive into that, it'll give me a list of everyone associated to this organization that's associated in the portal. So for instance, if myself as Scott Jones wanted help in completing this client profile, I would be able to create a new client user and assign them rights to all submissions associated to my organization. So as administrator, I would be able to create new client users to help me fill out. So maybe there's someone in finance where I need actuals that I would create them as a client user and then instruct them to complete a page of the application in the system. So it gives you some flexibility as to how you want to complete forms. Some grant forms can be very, very large, and you need a kind of a team to complete them, and others you can complete by yourself. So it all depends. It gives you that flexibility. So that's, in a nutshell, the client profile. If I dive into the My Applications section, we're greeted with the program list. And what that does is it shows all the applicable programs to my user or my client profile, and all the programs that have either submissions that I've worked on before or submissions available to start. So we can see all the program names on the left-hand side here. The program status is where things become interesting in the sense that the yellow question marks mean either a form was released to me that needs completion, or I have a form in progress in these containers that needs more attention. Moving over to the actions column, this is where I would either open the program or view more program details by clicking the question mark. This would have things such as due date, maybe a program description if there was a more detailed version of that, and when the program started. So if I close that window and dive into one of these, I'm going to choose the Smart Green assessment. This brings me to another table, and it shows me all the submissions associated to my user for this program. So as you can see, I have one assessment application that I've started, and my project title for this is the solar panel assessment, and we can see that the status is in progress. If I had previously applied to this program with this organization, I would see a number of other submissions underneath here, and the status would say submitted. So I can view the due date as well, and also have actions. So I can copy the form, I can delete the form, or I can edit the form. So in this particular case, we're going to edit it. And it brings me to a summary of the application that I'm filling out. What this shows me at a glance is all the sections that are required for me to submit this to the back office. So as you can see, Scott Jones, our user, is almost done this form. He has the last two sections of the form on the last page yet to complete. But everything else, in the interest of time, I've gone in and pre-filled. So I'm going to just dive into the form and show you some of the controls used to ensure good data coming into the system. So as you can see on this first page, it's the applicant organization information. So what you see is a number of fields that are read-only, and this is because to ensure the quality of data coming over to the back office, this client in particular wanted a one-place account organization information update. So these fields are read-only, but they come from the client profile that we just looked at. So this ensures I'm only updating my address in one place. That doesn't mean that I can't have different addresses for different submissions. It's point in time, so as of right now, when I start this form, it will pull all my information over, and if I change my address in a year, that's okay, because it'll pull the new information as well. So as you can see, it's all read-only because I'm not supposed to edit any of this information anywhere other than the client profile. So if I scroll down, there's going to be some input fields on the bottom, and we've already completed those. So if I move on to the next page, we can show you some examples of validation on the submission form. So we can see here's a good example. So change of control in the last 5 years. So have there been any changes of ownership control of the applicant in the last 5 years? If I select no, then I can move on to the next section. But if I do select yes, then there's more information that's required of me to complete. So it conditionally, off of the input field, it conditionally displays the required information that comes from that question. So it dynamically changes depending on what I've selected. So we're going to swap back to no, but that can be used for conditional visibility, conditional read-only, that sort of thing. The system is very, very configurable in that sense. Here's another example. So if the process assessment location is different from the head office, if I click select no, then I don't need to know the mailing address of that other proposed assessment location. If I do click yes, the fields that were once read-only become editable, and they are now required to submit to the back office. So it just ensures that an officer in the back end is going to get all the information they need without intervening and making it clear to the front end user how to submit and how to complete the form to an acceptable completion point. So I'm going to jump right to the budget and funding section. So this is where the system can handle calculations. This example is very simple, but if I clear this out and update it to 3,000, upon save, we can see that the value will update to the correct one, and it just has the capability of making calculations as well. So if I go to the last page and answer all these questions, I can then save and submit into the back office, which I will do now. So I will just enter some random data. And we'll see that there's some validation on this as well. So if I tried to put in just a random email that wasn't formatted correctly, it would warn me with the web4 validation that's an invalid input, and then I need to correct my input to be acceptable. And then of course we have the date controls that use the formatting to properly input. So instead of punching in a date, I can click on the calendar and select one, but I also can input it on the keyboard as well. So now that I've clicked next and completed the form, you can see that I'm greeted with a message, your form is ready to submit, at the top of the screen. And then I would click Start Submit Process. This would show me the attestation for the form. If there was a legal sign-off at this particular point in the submission process, I would be able to provide that and make them kind of give a virtual signature, if you will. And in this case, it's just an agreement with a button, and then I say Submit to Program. And then this particular case would go to the back office, and I would be able to access it as a program officer in the CRM platform. So I'm going to switch it back to Eric so he can give you a quick explanation of that.
Okay, thanks, Mike. That was great. And what you've shown us is in this first scenario, is the Government Client Portal, the extension of CRM to the public, so citizens, applicants, recipients can access the portal, throughout the life cycle of their cases with the program, including completing applications, as you just demonstrated, or later on completing progress reports, which pick up information from the application and previous agreements, and display it back to the applicant so they can now put in actual data associated with that project. So now what we'd like to do is talk about the program-facing side, the dynamic CRM-based grant management solution. So the SMART program has actually been running on CRM for quite a few years now, I think since about 2007, 2008. They originally started in Dynamics CRM 4 and evolved eventually to, I think they're currently at Dynamics CRM 2016. So, from a program-facing side, an officer will have a fairly rich set of functionality, a lot coming right from the out-of-the-box CRM, and then a lot's been added with a grant management accelerator to provide specific grant type capability, for example, a submission log. So anything coming in from the Government Client Portal or from even entered manually would all go into submission log, so it could be tracked. It has to be maybe come in by a certain date, who submitted it, all the key information associated with each submission, so you have that all tracked in the system. And as we mentioned earlier, Government Client Portals need to interact. They need to integrate with the internal processes in Dynamics CRM to really get the efficiency gains, from from electronic service delivery in general. So, the submission log is an obvious connection point between the submissions coming in from the Government Client Portal, and then the assessment area allows Dynamics CRM to create assessments and then associate those assessments with the actual application form coming in from applicants through the portal. All the while, case files are being built and logs are being tracked associated with all the activity and information associated throughout the granting process. An agreement area will provide the ability to, from an agreement template library, to create one or many different agreement types and insert the information that's coming in from submissions through the Government Client Portal or client profiles, or from the officer information that's collected within CRM to generate a complete agreement to send out either as a file to the applicant or via an online form through the Government Client Portal. And then, of course, associated with the agreements is the financial information. In this particular case, SMART program manages project budgets and program budgets. So they'll, for a particular program like the Green Assessment Program, they'll be able to assign a tranche of money for a particular period, let's say 2017, and then they'll be able to award money and deduct it from that program budget. And then within each individual grant case, they can manage and amend those grant project budgets and associate expenditures and deduct from those budgets through a grant cycle. And the CRM system also tracks the various decision phases associated with grants going through the processes. So, obviously various decisions will be associated with different types of information that are coming in from the Government Client Portal. And then the very important stakeholder management. In this particular solution, the stakeholder management in the portal is exactly in sync with the stakeholder management within Dynamics CRM. So when applicants come to the portal and create themselves as a contact or an organization or an individual or an organization within the portal, that information is synchronized with CRM so the program officers can see this information, as well as other stakeholders such as partners, referees, program staff, et cetera. So that gives you an overview of the type of functionality, and now Mike's going to take us on a little tour through that aspect of the software.
So logging in as a program officer in the back end. So this would be the flip side of the submission that we just made. Once it comes into the system, both the end user who filled out the form and the program officer will get an email notification saying a case has been created. It'll provide the case number and the legal name of the applicant and the project title in the email, and we can take a look at that in a second when I show you the case file. And it would provide all the information I need to kind of get going on the case file and see if the applicant is eligible for the funding. So what you see here is Dynamics CRM. What we're looking at here is an example of a dashboard. So this is kind of something that I would see when I log in first thing in the morning to get a picture in time of my workload and what needs my attention. So we can see the number of cases by province on the left-hand side here. If that was an important factor, I would be able to break it down to see kind of what province is asking for the most funding. I have a list of the active case files in the above pane over here, and we can see that the Solar Solutions Inc. that Scott Jones applied under is at the top of the list because that just came in. If I scroll down to my activities, these are all the activities that I've been responsible for. So the last couple things that I sent out, I can at a quick glance know what I'm looking at, and then just a breakdown of the case files by program. So this is just an example of the things that you can do. These are very interchangeable. So if I needed to see something, let's say that my program wasn't province dependent, so like I didn't necessarily need to see this information, I'd be able to easily swap this chart out for one that did make more sense to me. And it's just a very dynamic way of crafting your workspace, and it gives you kind of a one-stop shop to see where everything that you're responsible for is at. So if I dive into the case file that we just submitted, this is kind of the landing zone, and everything is associated to the case file. So it's the hub of all that information, as we saw from Eric's slide and explanation. So this just came in today, and it gives me the information that's important to me right up front. So in the apply phase, the plan start date and plan completion dates are available to the officer right up top. And that was submitted in from the application, so from Scott Jones on behalf of Solar Solutions, Inc., and we can see that information here. So the primary contact is Scott Jones, and the legal name of client is Solar Solutions. So that would be the client profile he applied under. So if I wanted to see more, so if I was curious, I wanted to see more information about Scott Jones, I would be able to just click his name and see the information that he provided in the portal about himself. And in the center pane, the history of Scott Jones that we have in the system relating to him and communicating back and forth, and also the case files that are related as well. So if I jump back, I can do the same thing for the account. So Solar Solutions, maybe not all the applications came from Scott Jones. Maybe some of them came from his predecessor or his coworkers. So when I click on the account, I also see a very similar view. I can see all the information associated to the account that we've asked of him on the client profile or the government portal. So that's just in a nutshell how I'd be able to see that contact and manage it as well. So any information if I needed him to change his address or I'm seeing discrepancies, I would be able to reach out to him, and all the associations and all the actions associated to Scott Jones or Solar Solutions, Inc. would show up in the activities pane in the center of the screen. So moving back to the case file, we can see that on the left-hand side here is the information from the application. In the center pane is the activities that we were just talking about. So if I expand this a little bit, we can see kind of an example of the email that Scott Jones received. So it says, thank you for your SMART assessment submission. Your case file number is the number associated to the case file, and then has been received in a queue for review. All required documents. So it's just pointing Scott Jones in the right direction. It's ensuring that he knows that the information that he's submitted is received and kind of providing next steps if there are so. In this case, there aren't any. They're just waiting on the review to see if he's accepted for funding. And then if we scroll down, we can see more information that has come in from the application here that Scott has provided. And then finally, the financial details for the assessment information that came in from the application as well. So if you remember, we adjusted the other expenses column to be higher, to be $3,000 instead of $2,000, and then we submitted the total of 53. So the system has calculated an assessment funding request of $26,500 because it's 50% of the requested amount of Scott Jones. That's kind of the way that the program operates. So it's done that calculation for the officer in the back end by the number that he's requested coming in from the front end, from the application. So if we scroll up quickly, we can get to the decision history side of the screen, which identifies the business process flow, the checkpoints in the program for the decisions that program officers have made in the past. So if I look at the decisions drop down here, I have a number of options that I can choose. So if I found a mistake in Scott Jones' application or just something that needed verification, I would be able to click awaiting amendment and provide an amendment to Scott Jones in the portal of his form, and we'll get into that in a second. I would be able to reject the application if the submission contained something that just wasn't valid enough for funding, so I would be able to stop the program right now. I would be able to approve for review, so send this down the line or continue with the assessment. Maybe there's a deeper assessment like the review panel that I need to send to. I would be able to by selecting this decision. And then pending review is I'm still working on it, but I want to update the case file to ensure that it's not just sitting there. I've made a decision. I'm still looking at it, and I'm going to move forward once I've reviewed it to my liking. In the decision history area, it shows you where all the decisions I've made from that drop-down are. So it shows you just a history. So at a quick glance, I'd be able to see all the decisions made on this case file if I were to pass it to one of my coworkers, which I would be able to do by assigning it to someone else on the top here. And then scrolling down one more level, I'll be able to see the submissions within CRM from the front end. We're actually going to drill into this area right now. So as the program officer, I want to review the information that I want to review the actual form that the applicant has sent in, and that's what I would be able to do on this submission page here. So as you can see, in this iframe window we have right here, this is the exact form that Scott Jones filled out and submitted into the back end. And I would be able to see all the fields in the back office and be able to access whatever section I want and see it the way that the front end user has seen it. If I need to answer some assessment questions, I would be able to do so on the left-hand side in the same working screen. So all these questions I would be answering in assessment-wise would be right beside, and I would be able to review the information provided by the end user on the right-hand side there. If I were to find a mistake in this process or request a change from the end user, I would be able to create an amendment. And what this does is it copies all the information from the front end user's form they submitted, and it makes it editable. So they're able to submit a new form, kind of a second version of the first form. So if I needed just an address change, I would be able to create an amendment. They would be able to go into the form, only change the address, and then submit back in, and I would be able to continue on in my process. So if I go back to the case file here, if I were to release other forms, like the progress report that Eric was talking about, I would see the record down here as well, because that would be another form created in the front end for Scott Jones of Solar Panel, of his organization to fill out. Then if I were to craft an agreement, it would be here. All the information associated to that agreement would be displayed here. And what I'm going to do is just show you quickly how I would be able to create one of those. So I would come up here and click Create Word Template, and then I would be able to click on Contribution Agreement Assessment Funding. And what this does is it pulls the information that I have mapped in Word to a document that I will send out to Scott Jones, notifying him that his funding has been accepted and that we're going to continue on in the process. So as you can see, it's pulling the case file number, it's pulling the address information provided by Scott Jones, it's pulling that 26,500 number that we discussed earlier. It's pulling all that information from the case file and providing it in a document. Now, it's in draft mode, so it doesn't send right to Scott Jones, although I could have it be automated, the whole process be automated. It's editable as of right now, so I would be able, as an officer, make slight adjustments to the document before sending it out. So that is the case file in a nutshell. I will toss it back to Eric.
Well, thanks, Mike. So and we're going to open it to questions now. We have a few minutes left. You know, Mike has given you the 25-cent tour, and there's obviously a lot more to see, but you know, in the amount of time that we have, we just hit some of the highlights. But you know, what we're demonstrating here is a full end-to-end process to manage a grant and contribution program. And you know, with a public-facing government client portal that meets security and privacy requirements for the Canadian Privacy Act, allowing the applicant to manage his own information, a CRM side that allows the program officer to do all the things that they need to do, and complete synchronization from end to end wherever the government client portal needs to you know, share information and functionality with the CRM system. I can switch to the next slide here. Okay. Okay. So if you want to know more, we actually have a fairly detailed training event coming up. It's Portals for Dynamics CRM and Customer Experience Management Bootcamp. And if you are looking at building a portal for Government Client Portal as an extension of Dynamics CRM, this course is an absolute must. So it's on February 27th. And for this course and other courses that we offer, you can find this information on our events portal, which is events.eperformance.com. You see the address there in the bottom left side of the form. Okay, so thanks very much, folks. We appreciate you joining us today, and I hope you've gained some a little more insight into Government Client Portals.